have the objectives that we want to cover. It says discuss how firearms and bullet evidence is collected from a crime scene. And that's the first one. Then we're going to learn why bullets fired from a gun can contain unique markings and striations. And then the third one, examine how investigators can estimate the distance between a gun and a shooting victim. All right, and then the fourth one, investigate what information forensic scientists can learn from tool marks. And then the last one, discuss how forensic scientists can recover serial numbers from firearms and vehicles. So those are the objectives that we're going to be looking at. Let's look at the first one. Discuss how firearm and bullet evidence is collected from a crime scene. Anybody want to discuss that one? And you know what, guys? Let me double check something. Something seems to feel a little off. You guys did complete last week, did you not? You did complete after the midterm. Right, so you did get the lesson in. Okay, just checking. Just making sure. So how are these items collected from a crime scene? Feel free to jump on the mic. So as we always do with evidence, of course, we're taking our pictures, we're documenting the scene as it is before we go in and touch anything, right? The first step with collecting any evidence as far as a firearm or bullets are concerned, firearms need to be unloaded for safety purposes, right? What's the next step? Need to use caution, good. Then what are we doing? What about tagging? Yep, put a note on it. So you're tagging it, and what you're doing is by removing it from the crime scene, you're putting this note, like Catherine said, you're putting this note on it just to identify which crime scene it belongs to. So there's usually identification numbers, and these identification numbers will be put on that note. What else? What about bullets? Right, so you have to collect each in a different envelope. What about marking it, like we did with the note, with the firearm? Do we mark it? So we do indeed mark them. They actually mark the sides of the bullets. All right, so let's move on then Objective 2, learn why bullets fired from a gun can contain unique markings and striations. What are we talking about there? Noelle, please feel free to chime in. So when we talk about Objective 2, we have to talk about the making of a gun, okay? Guns are made out of steel, and they have to be drilled into. And these drills cause these different spirals along the inside of the gun. And these spirals are going to make etchings or markings on the bullets themselves. They're going to cause these striations. Different guns, different types of gun, different manufacturers, depending on how often the gun's been used, all of those things are going to come into play as far as what markings, what striations are going to be on the bullet. All right, so I kind of answered that one for you guys. Sorry, Catherine. I got to talking about it and it just kind of came out. You have to talk about the making of the gun itself and the use of the gun in terms of the different markings and striations that can be on the bullet itself. Anything else you want to add to that? All right, so let's move on to Objective 3 then. Examine how investigators can estimate the distance between a gun and a shooting victim. What takes place here? Two parts that we have to look at. One being the gunpowder residue and one being the shot pattern. So if we start with gunpowder residue, that will determine when a gun is fired, we have gunpowder residue that comes out. Usually it gets on the firer, the person doing the firing from the gun, more so than it does the person that is being shot at or the victim. This has to do with close proximity. So the closer you are, the more gunpowder residue that you'll have on you. Now, we know that guns can be fired at close range. So the victim itself may also have gun residue. But what else as far as these patterns? These shot patterns. So we can compare different patterns to determine about how close, but without the gun itself, it's hard to determine the exact distance. We can talk about the bullet itself as far as the formation of the lead, the changing of the lead as after it's fired and once it hits its target. So we'll have a change in the lead due to distance, and that will help us determine distance as well. So depending on about how far along the bullet is once it makes impact will determine the shape of the lead. All right, so for number 3, we talked about gunpowder residue and we talked about shot patterns. And with shot patterns, we talked about needing to know the gun, the type of gun, and we talked about the formation or the deformation of the bullet itself over time, over a distance until it makes its impact. So number 4, objective 4, investigate what information forensic scientists can learn from tool marks. This kind of plays with striation. They can link it to a specific tool, okay? Just like a fingerprint, tools that have been used have specific bangs and cuts and nicks. Different brands have different characteristics. So all of those things can come together as far as tool marks. Very good. I think that one's kind of self-explanatory. So let's move on then to number 5. Discuss how forensic scientists can recover serial numbers from firearms and vehicles. How do we get these? So all items, especially now, not necessarily older items, but all items now have serial numbers. All cars, all weapons. And when you purchase a car or you purchase a weapon, your identification goes with the serial number. They're put together, basically. Often when they run background checks with serial numbers, all that goes into play. So if you've purchased a gun, you can be, quote unquote, searched in a database to determine what numbers, what guns you have bought or what vehicles you have bought. So anything that's considered with your name, if they knew it was you, they can look it up that way. All right. They also, if they have the gun itself, can look at the serial number on the gun. But what happens if somebody tampered with or tried to remove the serial number? So usually we've got some sort of like a steel plate that holds these numbers. And if the steel plate was adhered to the gun or the vehicle and then the numbers etched onto the gun, if the plate was removed, sometimes they can go to where the serial number should have been and try to determine the serial number as it may have gone through that plate onto the material beneath it. So we're looking for those etchings. Anything else? All right, so that's it. Unless you guys have something to add, those were the Unit 5 objectives.